Hello guys and welcome to another video. My name is Mark, I'm an entrepreneur and property investor. And in today's video, we are looking at what a Labour government that's just come into power means for UK house prices. Now, I'm going to look at some past data, I'm going to look at some future predictions, and then I'm going to give a bit of my own thoughts in terms of what I think is going to happen. And I'm going to share with you my strategy for investing over the next 5 years. And that way, hopefully everybody watching this will get some information that maybe they didn't have before, as well as my personal view. And hopefully we can all invest and get richer together. That is the aim of this channel. And if you like these sort of videos, please give this video a big like. It really does help me out with the algorithm. And if you haven't already subscribed, why not consider subscribing? Remember, if you're looking for a description, you want to book a one-to-one call with me until I get to 10,000 subscribers, you can do that absolutely free of charge, and you can talk to me directly and we can chat about anything that's on your mind. Now guys, let's get into video. I've got a screen to my left, so if I start looking to the left, you know why. I want to pull on some data, and by pulling on that data, hopefully I can give some perspective. So the first thing to mention is obviously Labour have got in. They've got in with a massive majority. They are able to command Parliament and pretty much do whatever they want within reason. Obviously everything has to go through the House of Lords. Now they come in with some strong policies in terms of housing. They're going to build a lot of houses. I mean, let's face it, every government says the same thing. And we know that whilst governments can affect it with things like tax breaks and incentives, the market is really supply and demand, right? Like if there's enough demand, the builders will supply it. If mortgage rates are high and people can't afford it, then people aren't going to buy it. So there's only so much that a government can really do when it comes to building houses. They've obviously got some renter reform stuff in there, getting rid of non-fault evictions. Now, me as a landlord, I'm not that dissatisfied with that ultimately. If a tenant's paying their rent and they're treating the property well, I'm happy. I would like to know that there's some landlord protections that if a renter isn't looking after my property, that I'm going to be able to claw back any issues and that I'm going to be protected as well. And I'm sure that the intent of these measures and these bills that are coming through will have both sides protected to some extent. So there's some renter reforms and things like that that are coming in, which as a landlord, it bothers me a little bit, but not too much. The promise to build 1.5 million houses, I don't know. Every government says the same thing. Who knows what will happen? But what's really interesting, when people say a Labour government's coming in, house prices are going to reduce, if we look at the data and we actually look at the past, then we'll realise that that just isn't true. And I'm going to bring up a graph right now, and that graph you can see now should show that over the last Labour government, from 1998 to 2010, house prices rose 176%. Now, there'll be some people saying, this is nothing to do with the government, this is to do with the economic times, all that sort of stuff. And of course, you're right. Of course it's true. Of course, the government can only do so much when it comes to house prices. But if we look at the past, then if you're expecting or wanting house price growth, and as an investor, I am, I've got £3.2 million worth of property in the UK, I'm planning on buying more, I want house price growth. This would suggest that Labour grew house prices by 176%. And if we look at the 2008 dip, and we took that out of the equation, they grew it by much more. What's really interesting is we look at the data from the Conservatives, and I will bring that up now, and we'll see that house prices only grew by 65% during a Conservative government over 14 years. So over a longer period of time and less growth. Now, again, you might say, we had austerity, we had to pay for the financial crisis, and again, you would be right. But my point really on all of this is that when it comes to house price growth, the government can only do so much. And when it comes to holding back house prices, again, they can only do so much. The reality is that inflation is a major driver of house price growth. And every major economy requires inflation to function. Imagine a world where the goods and services you were going to buy every month got cheaper. Well, you'd put off purchases. Now, this is what deflation would do, right? So if we had money becoming worth more over time, then the reality is that new car you were going to buy for £50,000 next year might be £45,000. So you would delay it for a year. Well, now we need to build less cars. So now we need less people to build cars. Now we need less designers of cars, less marketing people. Do you see my point? Without inflation, people put off the purchases of goods and services. So it's incredibly important that any major functioning economy has inflation in order to stimulate demand. So if we take that as a starting point and understand that inflation has to take place, and most G7 and Western economies are targeting, around 2%, a nice steady inflation curve, well, we know that the cost of building a house is going to increase on average, by about 30%, if you compound it up over the next 10 years, by about 30%. The value of the land should inflate. And this is just inflation. This is just nominal versus real value. So the value of the land will increase by 30%. The value of the end product will increase by 30%. And that's not to take into consideration supply and demand in any way, shape or form. Now, can I see a world where house prices stall or reduce over the next 10 years? I think I probably can in certain areas of the country. Now, a good example, affordability in the southeast, the southwest, in London is incredibly stretched. But in Sheffield and Kettering, Wellingborough, Corby, Birmingham, some of the areas, Nottingham is another good example, some of the cities and areas that we're buying in, well, house prices, we're still buying a 3-bedroom house in Sheffield for under £150,000. Whilst the average national house might be $288,000, we're purchasing an average house for 150k. If mortgage rates come down, even with mortgage rates where they are, let's say for example, right now, I've just secured a 2-year fixed on about 5%. Even at 5%, borrowing £125,000, you're only talking about a payment of about £500 a month in terms of a mortgage payment. There is so much room for affordability in those cities and areas. Now, there are some northern cities I would stay clear of, and I've done other videos on that, and I don't want to just hate on one location, but I constantly seem to mention places like Blackpool, where they've got a shrinking tourism industry, they've got a shrinking population, house prices are shrinking, no surprise there, but there are some cities that I would stay clear of. But these big economic cities like Sheffield, like Manchester, like Liverpool, Sheffield, very low unemployment rate, really good rental yields. These sort of cities have got really good house price growth potential. And in fact, over the last 5 years, have outstripped most of my southern properties. So I say all of that to say that for me, house price growth is still inevitable over the next 10 years. And I'm always taking a 10-year view. I think with property, it's very hard to take a 2 or 3 year view. Who knows what global turn we're going to face? Who predicted COVID? Who predicted the financial crisis? Yes, you can always pick out some outliers who did, but the reality is the globe didn't. So when we look at this, we don't know over 2 or 3 years. I tend to take a much longer, broader view, 10, 15, 20 years. And my expectation is with inflation, with everything else, house prices will grow steadily. Now, if we look at Savills' prediction, which I'm going to right now, and I'll bring that up, they're suggesting over the next Parliament, over the next 4 years, there's going to be a 21.6% growth. So for someone like me, I've got about £3.2 million of property. I stand to make about 600k on that over the next 5 years. Now, that's not real terms, that's nominal. And it's really important to remember that inflation will still bubble away underneath, and inflation will erode at the value of the debt as well as increase the value of the property. And this really is why property and real estate investors get rich over a long period of time. It's also the reason we're always quite cash poor, because we're always spending money, going and getting another property, leveraging ourselves up, paying for the next bit of maintenance. There's always a deal out there, but it's the reason that property prices, inflation is going to always bubble up. And the real key indicator on all of this is that end year bank base rate, so the Bank of England base rate. This is what the mortgages are going to cost the person who's going out and borrowing the money. They're saying, I'm going to have to look at the screen, this year, 4.5 by the end of this year. Next year, 3.5, 2.5, 2. They're saying interest rates are going to come down. And the whole world is talking about cheaper interest rates. And the reality is, right now, in the modern economy, just having the money isn't enough. It's not valuable enough. You have to do something with capital for it to be worth money. Now, I understand that COVID happened, we pumped all this money into the system, and we had to claw some of it back out to stop inflation. I understand that. But we're going back to pre-COVID times now, and we're going back to cheap lending. And the reason we've got cheap lending, in my opinion, is just holding the money, just having money shouldn't be valuable enough. doing something with capital, growing the economy, buying that property, doing it up, adding value. That's where value is created. Simply holding cash in a modern economy is not useful. So cheap interest rates, I agree with Savills absolutely completely. 2% in 3-4 years, absolutely, I can see that completely. But if we assume that and we then take that £125,000 mortgage, well now you've got a payment of about 225 quid. How much room for growth have you got on that Sheffield property? I think today may well be one of the best days to be going out and shopping for property in certain locations. So guys, what are your thoughts on the UK housing market? I've pretty much outlaid mine. I believe strong growth over the next 5 years. I think 20-25%, something like that is reasonable. Interest rates hitting around 2%, I think that's reasonable. They're going to come back down, there's no question. The whole globe is built on cheap money. There's not value in owning money anymore. I can't see how that benefits any economy. So I think that interest rates need to be cheap so that people can borrow, go and achieve things, grow economies, grow businesses, take risks, build properties, renovate properties, increase the value of land, you know, all of those good things that help grow a country. And I think cheap interest rates is key for that sort of thing to be happening. So guys, I'd love to know your opinion. That's mine. I will see you on the next video. Subscribe and like if you haven't. And if you haven't already booked a free call, and even if you have booked a free call with me, book another one. Hit that link. I'll see you on the next video.